and welcome back to the Driving Talk podcast powered by Icon. We've got another episode for you, and as last week, we've only got two hosts. Max has decided to take some time out this week. I think he's in his living room making Porsche noises. I don't know. He's off doing something, getting ready for the new season probably. But we've got a guest who's a very good friend of mine, Paul Harvey. You joined me once again on the sofa after time away last week. How are we all doing, gents? Pretty good?
Oh, sorry, we're probably both waiting for each other there, aren't we? Yeah, no, all good, thanks, Rob. All good. I'm dialing in from London from a hotel room, so I tried to somehow match your background with a bit of neon blue, but yeah, looking forward to getting into it and understanding all about Scott and his history.
Absolutely. And Scott Woodwiss joins us, who you may have seen recently. He covers a lot of the BRSCC club racing going on. That's part of his day job there as well, with his social media links with the British Racing and Sports Car Club. But you've commentated on Super GT, Brazilian touring car racing. You've commentated on things all around the world. And can I kind of tell do you want to tell the viewers on a phone call you got earlier today on something you're potentially going to do this weekend?
I don't know whether I've announced it by then, but it has something to do with going to Dubai and a certain Italian mark. Something's happening this weekend, which came completely out of the blue. That's all I'll say for now, because once I get the go-ahead, probably tomorrow, I'll want to announce it on socials. But yeah, it kind of knocked me a bit blindsided. That was quite an unexpected but very positive phone call I had, so looking forward to that. But yeah, it's crazy where sometimes being a commentator takes you, and all that sort of stuff with Super GT and with Brazilian stock cars was all remote stuff, but it's still great to get the opportunity. And then you could do that one weekend, but next you're trackside at Brands Hatch watching Mazda MX-5s and city cars go around for a weekend, which is quite the contrast, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm motorsport through and through. It's the one thing I'm passionate about more than anything else in the world, and it's one industry that I want to be in, and I'm privileged, I'm grateful that I'm in it, and I don't ever want to leave, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. I'm going to assume it's Piaggio scooters or something like that. You know, the old Italian mopeds or a Vespa.
See, you spoiled it now. See, I was going to announce that, but you absolutely spoiled it, you absolute scoundrel. No, for the record, it's not Piaggio. It's something a bit more exciting than Piaggio. But anyone who can put two and two together and use Google will probably be able to figure out what it is. But I won't announce it just yet until on my socials, until I've got it confirmed, which is probably going to happen tomorrow morning. I've had the go-ahead on my side, so I just need to get the go-ahead on their side to thumbs up, and then it'll be out on socials. It'll probably be out on socials by now, but just for the purpose of right now, it's not official yet, so I'm going to wait until it is. I don't want to jinx it.
You don't want to jinx it. Well, I'll tell you what, mate. We'll keep our fingers and toes crossed for you. Obviously, we start. We're sort of recording this on the week beginning the 29th of January, so we've just had the Daytona 24 hours conclude at the weekend. Paul, have you seen much of it?
Didn't get to see too much. Obviously, know the result, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in due course. But it's just fantastic to start to see everything come to fruition that series has tried to achieve with all the new manufacturers, all the new cars. Obviously, Daytona is a great event on a standalone basis, but also to have something so early in the calendar year for a full endurance race of that duration is a great way to kick off the motorsport year. I have to be honest, I've been slightly distracted by the red flares and the night running at the Monte Carlo Rally. There's been some fantastic footage and socials of that, if you've seen anything. And that's been pretty amazing as well. But yeah, what a great start to the year.
The only thing that's gutting about the Monte Carlo Rally, I just felt the wind go out of my sails when they announced the entry list, because WRC2 is packed full of some brilliant drivers, brilliant cars. Oliver Solberg is my tip for that. We saw his driving on the RAC Rally was just phenomenal, but 9 cars for the top mark in WRC. Scott, I mean, surely it makes you feel the same.
Yeah, it's disappointing. The thing is, it's a double-edged sword, because for me, WRC1, it's produced, I think, arguably the fastest rally cars we've ever had pretty much since the Group B days. And I'm a massive Group B advocate of it. It's one of my favourite categories of all time. I'm certain it is to you two gents. But the fact is that the cold hard facts is we've only got 3 manufacturers and like 8 full-time drivers, if that. And that's not WRC. I mean, yes, the Ford, the Hyundai, and the Toyota are all spectacular. They, with the hybrid system and the engine they've got, they're packing 500 horsepower, and they've got aerodynamics probably more sophisticated than they had in Group B days. Therefore, it's genuinely, I think, the fastest rally cars we've ever had. But for what show? I mean, there's literally, as I say, 6 to 8 full-time drivers, whereas it's been rumoured that they're thinking about getting rid of those and instead bringing in a Rally 2 Plus category. So they're going to have the Rally 2 Plus regulation, Rally 2 regulations, but with possibly some hybrid, I think, and a different sort of aero kit on top of it, so it makes the cars a bit more powerful, a bit more faster. And I think that will take us more back to the late days of Group A, to the early WRC car days when manufacturers could build those cars, and also as well, it makes it more accessible for customers, because you don't really see there's virtually no customers with Rally 1 cars. As brilliant as they are, I think I saw someone was reading the cost difference or something between that's like it's like €1 million for a Rally 1 car compared to maximum like 200,000 to 300,000 euros for a Rally 2 car. I mean, I think also proof is the fact that Toyota have just launched their new Rally 2 car, and it debuted at the Monte Carlo Rally. There's Hyundai, there's Ford, there's Skoda still involved. Citroen still have a works team in WRC2, so in Rally 2. So that, to me, and I've thought this for the while, is that whilst those Rally 1 cars are brilliant, it's just not working. And Rally 2, I think, is the better option, particularly with the Rally 2 Plus kit, like GT3 did going into WEC now with a GT3 Evo kit. I think that's the way WRC needs to go, because then the cars are a bit more relatable. They're a bit more of the shape of some of the road cars that you see out there. And you've got, Hyundai, Ford, and Toyota are already there. You've got Skoda, you've got Citroen, you've got a couple others, and the Volkswagen's still eligible. And I'm certain you could have other manufacturers come in and create cars that are easily doable to go into that class, like Renault or Peugeot or somebody else. So I think that's, for me, the way forward in WRC2. And at least then you can go forwards, and there's more chance for customers to get involved, because it's more easily accessible, because those cars are a third of the price of the Rally 1 cars. So to sum it up, they're magnificent, but horrifically expensive, and there's no manufacturers interested. Whereas WRC2, Toyota just launched their new car. So that to me says it all. Toyota, I think, probably see the future in that, so they're getting started now.
Isn't it the case with a lot of series, isn't it, where they start off and then it ends up becoming prohibitively expensive? Manufacturers and other people just say, look, there's only one or two of us left. We've bagged a couple of titles because probably in 20 years' time, no one will remember that there's 8 cars in it. And then we go back to a much more affordable series and we build from there again. As you say, if manufacturers are directly going into WRC2, then that's obviously, they think, the sweet spot. Customers have always been a key part of all motorsport, and particularly rallying, and to be able to have those privateer entries. So, I just think it's a natural evolution. We've seen it in multiple series, and it's now becoming so marginalised. But let's enjoy the cars in their own right. I still love rally drivers in terms of skill, debatable as to whether or not the ultimate car control, not necessarily to squeeze the fastest lap, but whether they got the best feel and best car control is very arguable from my perspective. And I think I love watching them perform. But it's just always happens, doesn't it? It becomes prohibitively expensive. People move away from the series, and it either reinvents itself or it folds in some cases and disappears altogether.
But it provided some, like you say, Paul, some spectacular scenes in the night stages. The spectators with the bright red flares, honestly. If you are listening or watching on our YouTube, or listening via Spotify or Apple Podcasts, any good podcast outlets, I really implore you, get yourself on YouTube and just type in Monte Carlo 2024 night stages. Some of the spectator banks are just bright red. It's like a pyrotechnic show, and it's what makes rallying great. And although we didn't have a lot of the Rally 1 entries, we still had, some of the best drivers in the world going hell for leather. Thierry Neuville won the rally only just from Sébastien Ogier, and those two, they're not exactly new kids on the block, are they? But the one thing for me, once again, Pride of Britain, Elfyn Evans completed the podium, so we've got a British driver in rallying. And Scott, you made a point about the cars almost getting, if they do that, you're almost getting to the era of Group A into WRC. That's definitely not a bad thing, because look at how many manufacturers then turned up. Someone actually put up an entry list from 2023 Monte Carlo Rally, and so many different cars were in the top spec WRC then. And, you had works teams from the likes of Citroen, Ford, Subaru, Skoda, Seat, I think, was still in it at that point, or they may have just ducked out at that point. So many cars, but then you also had in the same category customers. And again, Paul, spot on. Customers will always keep racing ticking because the manufacturers will come and go as they please. They'll take their toys and go and race somewhere else. So ultimately, it's the customers that are going to win.
Yeah, see how easy it is for me to hijack your question about Daytona and get it onto rallying, Rob, you see. Got nothing to do with Daytona whatsoever. But as soon as you start talking about Group B and everything else, the pure motorsport and adrenaline addict of all of us comes out, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and there's nothing that gets the pulses racing more. I don't think than the WRC. Just rallying in general. Talking about rallying, actually, we'll come back to Daytona, but talking about rallying, there was also, to me, probably some of the best news of the year is the fact that the British Rally Championship is going to be on free-to-air TV. Hallelujah. Finally. Thoughts, gents?
Yeah, that was a piece of news that made me smile this morning. I really enjoyed that. And the fact it's going to be on ITV4 in a prime time slot, it's essentially getting, in some ways, it's kind of getting BTCC treatment. Not obviously 7-8 hours worth of coverage, but it's the fact that it's going prime time and it's going to be on the same platform that British Touring Cars is, and it thrives. Yeah, they've managed to put it on ITV a couple of times and it's helped. But I think the fact they put it on there, they've made it happen, and it shows that I think people are starting to open their eyes a bit towards rallying a bit more, which is quite good. I don't think we're quite at the level of where we were before when we used to have the old school days of, when it was on the BBC and, old favourite of mine when I was a kid, Top Gear Motorsport, and when you had, the likes of Mark James and Tiffany Dell, and they would have the proper coverage they ran through. If you look hard enough on YouTube, you will find those kind of broadcasts, and I will happily sit and watch. If I can find a playlist with the full season, I'll happily sit and watch it. Just all those full length ones, about half an hour each, because just that's bags of entertainment for me looking back at that. So I'd be very intrigued to see what the coverage level's like. Hopefully we can get some really good sort of high level quality coverage that I'm sure we could do. I think there's one person that I think I'd like to see involved because he's a rally fan through and through, and I hope at least at the very least he'll be stage side. And if not, I think anyone who's looking for somebody to get involved in it,
it's got to be Paul Woodford, surely.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah,
yes.
I think if he's not, and I speak as an advocate because he's rally mad, and I see all the stuff on his social media, and he's rightfully a massive rally fan, and I will give him a shout out because the stuff he did on the Albert Clark rally, the RAC rally, absolutely sublime when he was doing his best William Willard impression in terms of throughout the days and wearing the old school jacket, and all the coverage that he did was genuinely spot on. And watching all those days back of action was brilliant to indulge in. I know many people really did appreciate all the coverage that he did, and he's rallying through and through. He's an ex-rally driver, does lots of stuff at special stage. I think that, in my humble opinion, I think that the producers of that coverage, if maybe not this season, but at least in future seasons at some point, will be foolish to overlook him and not have him involved in that in some cases. I would love to see him eventually be the lead presenter or on that British Rally coverage where possible, because I think given his experience and how much he's done in rallying, and I'm certain know that he was very happy with his news this morning, that spot is kind of made for him, in my opinion. So I think he would absolutely relish in that. I think he'd do a stellar job compared to everything else he's done. And if he hasn't at least been considered already, the producers of the coverage need to, I think personally, politely need to wake up and give a knock on his door, because he'd be fantastic. But yeah, on the whole, it'll be good to see kind of what I haven't really kept too much up with British Rally Championship in the last 2 or 3 years or recently, but I'll be watching it with intrigue because I want to see the new current stars, who's coming through and who's doing what, and just expose the next generation of British and Irish rally stars to a new audience that are usually used to watching stuff on ITV4 that's British Touring Cars or Goodwood Festival of the Speed or other kind of stuff like that. It'd be good to give them some proper exposure, the exposure that I think they need and deserve, and it already step things up to take the British Rally Championship hopefully back into an era where it deserves to be.
And clearly someone at ITV, particularly ITV4, and their programming is very pro motorsport. Mm-hmm. And as Rob says, to see anything come back free to air, to reach sort of mass audiences, and people digest stuff not just on live TV now, to be able to stream it on the various platforms, and for that to become more readily available is great. And it's great to see ITV continuing to support British motorsport in general, with the way they've looked at the TOCA package with BTCC and also the full coverage of the support races. So the Minis and the Porsches and everything else. So we get to see Max on TV regularly. They're really committing to British motorsport, and at a time when other people are moving away from making stuff free to air terrestrially. So that's great for ITV to be doing that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. The free to air bit, that is the key, because so much motorsport over the past 10 years. I mean, certainly I'm probably going to start ranting now because it's something that's an absolute bugbear. I mean, let's be honest, gents. When we all grew up, we all watched motorsport on free to air TV, and that's what got us hooked. That's what, kids up and down the land, okay, there's a cost of living crisis going on at the moment. So you potentially got kids that don't have the same access to cable TV and satellites that we do. So stuff going out on stuff like ITVX and ITV4 is, if it inspires just one kid that just sits down in front of the TV and thinks, God, I want to do that one day, and they decide. And it's not all about the driving. We all know that. If it inspires them to go and do engineering and go and going into the engineering side of things, or running a team, or the business side of motorsport, or even sponsorship, PR, marketing, any of that, if it inspires them to be a part of this great sport that, let's face it, it's the reason we're on this podcast. We all love things with 4 wheels and even 2 wheels. I mean, ITV brilliantly do great coverage of the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
And they've shown a lot of the MotoGP stuff. I think they still do, don't they? They show a few of the live races, or they may have stopped a year or so ago. So it's a good step forward. And the good thing is, I read a bit further into it. It's not just the top boys they're going to be showing. They're going to be showing all of the classes that rally in the British Rally Championship are going to be shown. So you're going to get from the top level of British Rally Championship down to the junior categories, so the 1000cc classes, the real grassroots sides of a national championship. And that's key.
And there's also this new Stellantis Cup they're going to run as well, which is going to be for, it's either if you're in a Peugeot or an Opel Corsa, I think it is, and that's going to run as like a new junior category, like feeder category into the British Rally Championship. So that's also been a nice addition on top of that too. And I think it'll be a really nice chance for people to just hopefully fall in love with rallying again. I think the response people that the Roger Albert Clark Rally got this year, again, touching on that with the coverage it got, and even seeing the amount of people that lined the town and lined the streets to watch the rally cars, that just shows that people still have an appetite for this sort of thing, and they don't forget that. And maybe that would have been quite a few people that maybe would have watched, whether it was on the days of BBC or then the Channel 4 days, WRC. I think it was on ITV at one point. I'm sure WRC was at one point.
Yeah, I think it was for a couple of seasons at least.
Those days that I watched growing up, in those days, it inspired them to kind of have a look at these cars up close and personal. And it's sometimes not an opportunity that many people get to see them, particularly when you've got a rally going through your town. And it inspires, you'd be surprised what one thing like that, how many people it can really truly inspire. So I hope it does. And this is a really positive next step to kind of, in like a rebound for the British Rally Championship, where it was a bit in the doldrums, I think, kind of 2 or 3 years ago. COVID didn't help, and there was a couple of points where it was getting a bit of criticism for its promotion and its lack of kind of presence at an event. But I think they've really turned it around with some help from Motorsport UK and some new promoters. The fact that it's now got to the point where it's healthy again, it's got a good entry, it's got a good structure, and now it's got free-to-air coverage in the similar sort of vein, not live, but in a prime time slot on the same sort of channel that houses the British Touring Car Championship. I mean, that's probably it's taking it into its healthiest era that it's been, and I'm certain for a long time.
Absolutely. So Daytona, Paul.
Should I just sit back and just let Paul talk to it? Because it looks like he's brewing up a very stern opinion. So I might just sit back and let him talk.
Well, I mean, great to see Porsche win. And the first glimpses of what the future is going to be holding for endurance, and particularly with the new cars. And it's going to be exciting, I think. If you think that there's still more to come from those categories, more entrants coming over the next couple of years, just seeing how that series has started, with the strength in the depth of field, and to see the new cars and everything else that's gone with it, it's pretty spectacular. Starting to get back to the heydays of endurance motorsport. It bodes well, particularly on the back of last year at Le Mans, with people like Ferrari winning first time out and starting to see more manufacturers. We've got BMW to come and everything else. So yeah, I mean, it's just the start of something very exciting, I think, for endurance racing in all categories, right across the field, right the way down to the GT cars as well. So yeah, what a great way to start the season and to get everyone sort of, on the sofa back into motorsport after what can only seem to be an eternity, but it's probably just a matter of 6 or 8 weeks since before Christmas when the last race was, and set the season up for the rest of the year. I think actually in a number of different categories, and it's been really interesting just to see how that's played out already.
Absolutely, and I did notice as well, Jenson Button managed to get himself on the podium there, so he might be a wily old fox these days, but he's still got it. Yeah.
He got his elbow out quite a few times as well in that Acura, watching some of the highlights. He wasn't afraid to properly get stuck in his own way, which was quite good to see. I think this is quite a significant result for Porsche in more ways than one, because you have to remember, I just had a look at a couple of the stats, is that not only did they win, and that's the first time that Penske's won it in, I think, a few decades.
Yeah.
But also, as well, on top of that, I think Porsche's took home 4 of the first 6 spots in Hypercar, which I think is quite a difference compared to where the GTP category was last year, when it was predominantly, I think it was more Cadillac and Acura with the advantage, and Porsche were kind of in the middle somewhere in 3rd place, and BMW were a bit far back. It was actually quite pleasing to see Porsche up there looking more competitive, and also BMW, because at one point they were in the podium places and looking a bit quicker, and they had drivers like, I think it was one of the Vantors, Lawrence or Dries Vanthoor, and they had René Rast in there as well. And that was a bit of benefit, I think. It was some experience that they had. They had some incredibly strong lineups, I think. And that was also key experience for them to take forwards into WEC this year with the WRT team, because they'll have been using that mileage and that data, I'm certain, to then push forwards and hopefully make the BMW a strong car in WEC this year. So we'll have to wait and see. And of course, it'll be WEC's European debut, because all they've done is race in IMSA. So it'll be the first time they've raced on the world stage outside of the IMSA category, which I'll be intrigued to see. But yeah, it was quite interesting. I think also the Ferrari squad did quite well. They won GTD, and that had a few Le Mans heroes from last year. So again, that will be a good opportunity for them to get some mileage in pre-season ahead of trying to, try and go for the WEC title in the hypercar. Good mileage.
Yeah,
going to get them under their belt.
And a Brit winning that as well. James Collado was in that car.
Yeah.
It's James Collado, Alessandro Pierguidi, David Rigon, and Daniel Serra. So.
What I like about that is the fact that it's the Ferrari effect of the fact that hypercars done this, etc. But there's almost a feeling like, if you look within motorsport now, that kind of, particularly with Ferrari being involved, it's like people are just falling in love with sports car racing again. GTs have been great in particular, but where all the manufacturers are coming in now, where particularly this year in the top class in WEC, for example, BMW are coming in with the WRT squad. Lamborghini have a single car they're going to run. I think it's a single car anyway. Alpine have 2 cars, and you've got other customer efforts now, more customer efforts from Porsche. Cadillac have only got 1 full-time car, but that is what it is with their program. And then you've got the likes of Toyota, Ferrari, and everyone else back involved, Porsche. People are just falling in love with sports car racing again, and I think it's great
Absolutely.
to see.
You've missed one mark that is very dear to my heart, Paul. What do you think that mark is?
Vauxhall.
Very good, very good. Well, to be fair, they were racing in it under the Chevrolet guys. Good old General Motors. Yeah. But it was in effect, it was the Ford debut, and they've put some serious backing. So, and they've got a Brit on board for that team as well. They had Harry Tinknell. I think they finished 31st overall.
They do need to work on their rear boot lids, because they do come quite open quite loose. Quite easy. I thought it happened to one. I heard in the commentary, so it's happened to both cars, and I thought, hold a minute, only like the 64s had it happen. But then when you watched back the footage and looked at the replay, and thought, oh no, Christ, it was both of them. So they both had the same.
Yeah. All good cars have their teething problems. It's a classic Ford thing, and if it's a proper Ford, it'll rust before it gets going properly.
Yeah. Well, if it's not falling off the back, it'll be a splitter falling off the front of a Focus, won't it, Rob? So you never know.
Thanks, Paul.
I will say one thing, though. I think we could all be in agreement. sounds like a Mustang should. I've heard some onboard
Oh,
on
it
that, and
does.
my God, it's one of the best sounding cars of the year already. I mean, the Caddy in prototypes is good, but for GTs, I think at the moment, and the Porsche sounds good, and a couple others, but Ford's going to take some beating because that sounds like a
It's-
proper how a proper Ford V8 should do. That sounds meaty.
I'll tell you what it's done. What was the first episode ever of the Driving Talk podcast, Paul? What were we talking about? The NASCAR at Le Mans.
Yeah,
So it's just taken over that job, has it not?
it has. And I mean, obviously, Chevrolet have had the dominant kind of V8 noise in endurance racing for a long time. And it's good to see another V8. I mean, a personal audible favourite of mine would be the V8 in the Z4 BMW, which revved really, really high. And that sounded, it wasn't necessarily the quickest, but it sounded $1 million. There's something about a high revving V8 in endurance racing that sort of stirs the soul and actually can physically feel it in the chest. But it's good to see these variety of different formats. And I think that's the reason, I mean, Ford have come into that. They've obviously now going to partner with Red Bull in Formula One. As you say, Ferrari are operating across both championships. You're starting to see more profitability in terms of franchise value in Formula One, which is creating a different perspective in different championships, enabling people to go racing and with confidence and not necessarily have all of their profit sort of sucked into running an F1 outfit at a loss and masking that through financial engineering, whatever it might be. So yeah, so WEC and that whole series is, as you say, people falling in love with it again. And I think it's just the huge variety of different cars. It still scares the living daylights out of me, sort of like the speed differential between some of those cars. I mean, if you remember back to Fernando Alonso a couple of years ago, cutting through the field in a prototype versus other cars, and there were some big accidents last year which took out some front runners at Le Mans at night because of the speed differential at the end of the straights. But yeah, fair play to everyone, and it's one exciting time for sports car racing, and the WEC and the European season coming ahead is really great. And I think, yeah, simple things, isn't it? Common sense, standardisation of regulations that are going to allow cars to run in IMSA as well as WEC in general, and then back over into the European series. You know, why has it taken so long to do things that everyone else seems so simple? And it can only be healthy for everyone on the back of that.
The only gutting thing is there's no British round.
Yeah, I'm sure most BUK are working on it on that side. But just quickly go back to the point. Carry on with the point Paul was making, is that it's quite. I sort of had a vision myself of thinking that where GTE was and where the manufacturers are dropping backwards, that eventually at some point GT3 would be a good replacement for it. And I think there was a point when people were going, "Oh, that never happened," because that's just going to be a conflict of interest with SRO, and they're not going to get on and stuff. But crazier things can happen, and it has happened now to the point where GT3 has taken over, and it's strength in numbers. It's strength in the fact that manufacturers are going to GT3 because ultimately, let's face it, when you want a top level sports car championship, whether it's customers or works teams, what do you want? You want manufacturers. You want as many of them taking part as possible because you want it to be the pinnacle of your category, of your chosen formula of motorsport. So it's working on that side, and it's good that ultimately you've got manufacturers get 2 slots, but it's not fully manufacturer dominated. They're trusting the customer teams. They're probably giving some background support, which I think is acceptable, but they're allowing the chosen customer teams to do the job for them and go, right, we trust you with this. We're going to give you all the support that you want, but you're essentially going to be our team, our works team, in all but name, I'm guessing, essentially. So go out there and do the job that you need to. And I think the ones that missed out, I mean, you've got Audi who... The two that missed out in WEC, which are Audi and Mercedes, I can kind of see why. Audi, because they're winding down all their customer programs, all their kind of proper programs for everything, because they're piling all their resource into F1 for 2026. And I think Mercedes as well. Mercedes, yes, have got a good customer system, but I think that they're too focused on, again, most of their resources are going to be on F1. And as far as I can tell, Audi and Mercedes don't have any plans to go forward into the hypercar class, which is probably, I think, where the ACO... the site and the FIA decided that they were going to pick their cars based on if they're currently involved. I mean, obviously, the explanation, of course, with Lexus is there isn't yet Toyota GT3. It's in the works, but it's not currently there yet. So Lexus is the next best thing. And if you look at Ford were making noises about going into the top class for a while anyway, and given the fact that their CEO, as you say, big on motorsport, and he's big on belief that motorsport will keep on getting the points. He even said one thing brilliantly, which was, we'll never. I think they're one of the first big manufacturers that are moving away from going into electric and stopping their electric production, going back into more combustible fuels, back to regular petrol, and possibly even going into the hydrogen ranks, which I know a couple of other manufacturers are getting into, trying to go forwards with. And I think he even said, if we end up being the last manufacturer that is still making petrol internal combustion engines, and everyone else has gone to electric in other places, he said, so be it. He said there will always be like a Mustang, there'll always be a hot version of it. So he's a firm believer of that, still of that old adage of buy on Sunday, sell on Monday. He's still firmly of that. And it wouldn't surprise if he looks at the next 2 or 3 years and go, you know what? GT3's worked pretty well. We've got the engine program going on with F1. That's with Red Bull. That's working well. Wouldn't surprise if he turn around and go, fancy piece of that top class in LM in hypercar or LMDH. Let's go and build a prototype. And it wouldn't surprise me as well if McLaren didn't go that same route either. Because let's face it, Zach Brown. I did love the fake shock when McLaren got announced and they went, oh, who's their team partner? Why, it's United Autosport. Colour me shocked. I never saw that coming. But it was. But I think. That's. It makes obvious sense. I mean, Zach runs. It's his team essentially with Richard Dean. He runs McLaren. That was never not going to happen in the best possible way. And I could easily see that. I think it'd be when they decide to give the hypercar class a go. I think they will, because they've got the capabilities to do it. Again, it's a no-brainer to again have United run those cars with help of the factory, basically as the factory team. And McLaren, I think McLaren will go to the hypercar class at some point.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's both Ford and McLaren are in prototypes within 2 years. I really do.
I'd say maximum 3.
I mean, Ford with the Ford Performance brand. I mean, Paul, how often do I bang on about supercars? And they've put some serious money down under to go into the new Mustang. And of course, we've had the issue with parity down there at the moment, but they've put serious money into that. They've put serious money into this GT3 program. They've got the new GT4 car as well. So we're going to see that's 2 parallels of GT racing. And Scott, like you said, I firmly believe if they've got this F1 engine program going, what's it really going to cost Ford, which is a global brand anyway, to go, you know what, sod it, boys, get the F1 engine, tweak it a little bit, stick it in a prototype, and we'll see where we go with it. It speaks volumes. They've pulled $12 billion they had set for electrification, and this guy's just gone, nah. Because he's probably seen what the likes of Toyota and that are doing anyway. So,
yeah. It's all the manufacturers. It's Toyota. I think I saw something the other day on LinkedIn that BMW now have managed to figure out hydrogen combustion. I think that's the way forward. Because I think people deep down who are petrol heads like us and stuff like that, I think we will always find a way to appreciate motorsport. All respect all the tech that the electric cars bring, but for me, I want a car with a bit of noise. I want a car
sound of the
smell.
smell.
And Toyota, I think, were one of the first, if not the first one to figure out. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. As far as I know, Toyota were the first ones that I saw, at least with a working car, to figure out hydrogen as a combustible fuel. Don't ask me how it works. I'm not that clever, but just that's what I've worked out. I think it's got to the point. I think there was one of the JCB or some of the other kind of big ones have also figured out essentially for bigger like construction machinery and for tractors
and he also released a video 2 months ago, Scott. They got one of those engines that they tested out on the Digger. They've put it in they basically dragged out an 08 plate Sprinter. They've retrofitted it into the Sprinter. And I'll tell you one thing, Paul, go on LinkedIn and go in, both of you, have a look on LinkedIn at JCB when you get a chance. Lord Bamford himself is driving it as a daily.
Yeah, and I think, some other manufacturers like Honda have held off a bit on full electrification because hydrogen seems to work. Synthetic fuels on mass production should significantly reduce the cost once they get the back of that. We know that people like Porsche are now sort of looking at alternatives to electric. I heard about a completely different battery technology this morning as well, which would be different to the sort of lithium batteries that we've currently got. I think the attractiveness of something like hydrogen is that the infrastructure's there through fossil fuel petrol stations. You just change the tanks over. I'm led to believe, I'm no expert in this, and the infrastructure could readily be converted into that. So it definitely has attraction, and I know that Honda have been holding off on the back of expecting that electric vehicles are a sort of a global climate reduction government-led initiative. The industry is coming up with all sorts of innovative ways, and maybe full electric cars in their format as they currently are, and they're going to continue to improve and get better in their own right, isn't going to be the only option. And if you actually look at it, in order to run out all of the current combustion engines to replace with electric, based on global levels of production, it's going to take 40 years. Just to go through that, swapping it out. So this is not an overnight fix by any stretch of the imagination. To get all of the cars off the road that are currently running on ice and go into electrification, it's 30 or 40 years away. So there's just they can't produce enough cars to swap them all out. And secondly, is the cost is currently prohibitive for a large percentage of the market. They just can't afford 50, 60, 70,000 pound cars. I mean, I'm looking for a new company car to take benefit in kind 8% advantage. Just an X5 with a hybrid, £105,000. Nothing. It's not. There's no cheap new cars, is there? So
no, there isn't. There's no cheap used cars nowadays. You can't even buy a decent banger.
And necessity is always the mother of all invention. So when we get to a point where we need answers, and we're at that point, and probably beyond that from the global climate perspective, we will be innovative, and there's no one answer to anything ever. There's always a number of different answers, and there's technologies that we don't even know about now that will come to light in 10, 15, 20 years' time before electrification is in full flow. So, it's an exciting, innovative time, both on the track and off the track in terms of the automotive industry. So, watch this space.
Christ, we've gone deep there, haven't we? We've gone from the news where we've spoken about a bit of rallying, 24-hour race, Le Mans, factory teams. What's the world going to be like in about 30 years' time? Well, it's we like to delve deep on certain topics on the Driving Talk podcast powered by Icon. But the reason we're actually here today, we're 35 minutes into the podcast, Scott. We've had a good chat already just about motorsport, and the one thing it showed us clearly, I mean, I know this having worked with you and been lucky enough to work with you, your passion for motorsport knows no bounds. It runs through your veins. You live and breathe it. Your day job is working with the BRSCC, so you literally work within motorsport every day. So let's take it back. When was the first time you got in touch with motorsport?
Well, you're taking me back now. For me, it already started, I think, from the tender age of, believe it or not, I think effectively, back in 1992. And this is before my second birthday. So literally, I think I first got some kind of exposure to it when I was one. To give a bit of background on before I was born, so my dad, to give a kind of roundabout kind of his story. So when he was young, he immigrated out to South Africa, was educated there. Then for a while, he moved out to Australia, and then came back in about roughly, I think it was the early 80s. So he only came back on the premise that he could go and do what was then, I think it must still exist somewhere, but what was then the Jim Russell Racing School at Snetterton. So he went there. He was the instructor there. He was he was quite good. Did a few more years there. He did eventually found himself going into Formula Fords for a bit. I think he even did a little bit of testing, loose occasional testing at Snetterton for Van Diemen, I think. And then he started doing Formula Fords at what was then the champion of Snetterton. I think he was at least champion of it in '88. And he also went and did the Formula Ford Festival twice, which was a slight claim to fame in some cases. 87, the hard facts were he got all the way to the final in his first go. He wasn't meant to be racing, because the guy who was meant to be racing got ill, and he happened to be there with his race kit anyway, just in case. He was going to be there at Brands Hatch purely just to be like a driver coach. But he'd never driven Brands Hatch. They'd even been to Brands Hatch before, so he'd never gone round. So the short version of that other story is he went round in practice, followed a quick guy until he was up on his pace, then dropped off, found a faster guy, didn't want to know his times. He then gets to the knockouts where there was more cars than we have in the festival. Festival's still popular today, but it's not. There was many more cars. This is still in quite the peak of Formula Ford in the late 80s, going towards the early 90s. So you had like 140, 160 plus entries at that time, all trying to get through 8 heats and then quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals. Makes it through his heat, makes it through his quarterfinal, makes it through the semi-final, and he finds himself at the back of the grid for the 87 festival final. And this is on the same grid as people as he's about like 24th of 26 cars on the grid. At the front, you've got names like Eddie Irvine had gone to win it, Thomas Mazzera, who Rob will know from the Australian days.
Oh, Thomas Mazzera,
Yeah,
bloody hell.
There was Alan McNish, there was Alain Menu, I think Pedro Chavez was on there, a couple of other different drivers in the mix on that point. And I think he told me he got as high as about sort of mid-pack in the first 5 laps, and then he hit a bump going through 30, lost it and backed it into the tyres. He was okay, and his sort of claim to fame, he won't thank me for this, but if you look on, there is the 87 final, and there is a small little camera shot showing him getting out of his car, and Tiffendale does even give a mention on the commentary saying that he's out of the race. So that was his small little 5 seconds of fame on that coverage. And then he did the festival again in '88, and I think he was in a position to go through, not win, to win to go through to the final in the semi. And then I think right towards the end, in the last couple of laps, his engine went, and he wasn't too best pleased about it. And then, so that kind of, so racing was always in my history in terms of stuff that I'd done before. I think when my dad had gone to South Africa, he'd been to Kyalami a few times and kept up to date with stuff and been there. I don't know if he'd been to any Grand Prix, but. And then he met my mum. They had me in 1990, and he was in the motor trade by then. He was working for Nissan and then for Ford for a while. He worked for Daewoo. Remember Daewoo for a while?
Yeah.
So I got taken to school in the Joyce Laganza and the Nubera, and which were all they're all just rebodied and rebadged chassis like Astras and Cavaliers and stuff, and just got rebadged. But to be fair, for what you got from them, they weren't too bad cars. There was the tiny little Matiz that they also brought together, and before that there was the Lanos, and there was the I'll tell you the full history of Daewoo cars now. The Lanos, and before that was the Espero, and there was what was the hatchback that was based on the Vauxhall Astra?
I'm trying to remember myself because I think my grandma had the Demio.
No, that was Mazda. But the funny thing was, and the reason why I remember that car particularly is because at one point it was raced in the Andros Trophy. That's how much anorak I am, is that I can figure these things out, and it's these little things stick and remembered. Someone raced a Daewoo. What was the name of the? It'll come to me at some point. I'm sure it will. There'll be a point literally where I'll just shout the name midway through this podcast.
So, for all intents and purposes, you're a Vauxhall man.
Partly. On the contrary, if you're going to ask me where my allegiance lies, I don't say it's because Rob's in the room here, but genuinely, I do have a very big soft spot for fast forwards. I am a fast forward man. Escort Cosworth, RS200, all the Focus RSs, maybe not the 5-cylinder one. I wasn't so keen on that one. And some other stuff. But yeah, for me, the two big ones for me in terms of fast forwards, RS200 and the Escort RS Cosworth. Oh, and the Sierra RS 500. Those are the three for me. Anyway, back to me. So yeah, and then where it all started for me was, that's the thing you learn about me, is that I'll go off on tangents and then I'll eventually come back. Just bear with it. Eventually, emphasis on that word. And then I think where it also, I don't remember receiving it, but I've still got it somewhere. I've still got it. It was a sign. You know those promo postcard pictures that they used to either you could ask for, or they would give them out, and they still do it at Motorsport and BTCC or British GT, wherever you go. So I think my dad managed to get a signed sort of promo picture postcard thing of Nigel Mansell. He signed it, and that was kind of, I think, where that kind of was one of the things that kind of set that off. And then just from there, my dad was still in the motor trade, but I would just, as a kid, I had, as any kid does, tons of toy cars. So I just sit there and play and make grids and stuff and race them around the living room. And then I used to watch, usually if I wasn't watching something like cartoons on TV or something, I'd watch motorsport videotapes, and it would be just 90s F1 seasons. It would be Le Mans. It would be all those crash compilations like And They Walked Away and stuff, and all those sorts of
Yeah.
There was the whole ones that they did in the days when there was no social media and like vlogging and stuff, there was when Nigel Mansell did that documentary series where he had a film crew that followed him around for like 3 or 4 seasons. He was he was like a motorsport influencer before the term motorsport influencer ever came along, because he kind of had to follow him around and kind of document his entire season. It's like no other F1 driver did that. It's like, and that was unique in that sense. So that was inspiring. He's always been one of my heroes, is Nigel Mansell. And then obviously once video games came along, that was when I made a beeline for all the racing stuff, and that was from there. I always wanted to race, and I firmly believe I will race one day at some point. But I think as a kid, I wasn't the most athletic, shall we say, and we never really had the money and the opportunity to do it. So I never got into that. And then I thought, well, maybe I could be like an engineer or a mechanic of some kind. Then I forgot that A-level maths goes straight over my head, so forgot that. So that, and then I came up with the adage that the late great Murray Walker said, which is that those that can do it and those that can't talk about it. And I thought, well, I can't do it at the moment, so I may as well have a go at talking about it. And here we are now.
Sorry, Paul. Were you going to cut it? Were you going to say something there?
Daytona next year.
That's it. Next year.
Well done,
yes,
that man.
My grandma had the saloon version. She didn't have the hatchback. She had the saloon version, and I can remember doing one road trip in it with my sister. We always used to go and spend a week with her when we were kids. And I think in one road trip, she lost all 4 of her hubcaps. It was epic. Such good build quality as well. You know, just good old. You know, when like General Motors tone it down to get to a day, you know it's going to be a bad car anyway. Yeah. But alas,
all of those days.
Only if she'd have known an automotive recycler that could have replaced her hubcaps at minimal cost and better for the environment, Rob.
Absolutely. What one like Silver Lake? You know, I've got to get that work plug in there as well. Yeah. But no, I must have been about 7 at the time. I just remember getting out and going, Grandma, why has all the hubcaps gone from your car? Literally, she was just like, wow. So in a Essex twang, you know, Essex girl growing up, she's like, well, so they are. And having a good old laugh about it.
Cable tie around a hubcap on a Steely was all the thing to stop them flying off up the A12 if it's Essex based.
Absolutely.
The last thing I say on Dayu is just to save your eyes. 2 things. Don't search Dayu Takuma. Don't search Dayu Muso. If you want to save your eyes, don't look at them, honestly, because they weren't 2 of the most
horrific cars. Absolutely
they weren't great.
Horrific cars.
And this is a very side note before we go into more stuff about motorsport. But very side note. This is how Dayu's kept on following us, right? So we went to first time I went to the US. I just remember this actually. We talk about Dayu's. So obviously my dad was still working for Day at the time. And none of this was planned. None of this is all genuine coincidence, right? We went to the car rental place. They got your rental car. Of all the cars that we get given as a rental car, Dayu Lanos in white. And I'm thinking, in America, how does this happen? Right? And the ironic thing is, we got to when we finished the holiday, we got back to the rental place. As we're turning in, someone crashed into us. But thankfully it happened. It happened essentially whilst we were technically on the car rental's property, so we were there for a little bit. As soon as they figured it's on the rental properties company, it's their problem. You can go and get your flight. We thought we were going to miss it, but thankfully we managed to get going and we were fine. But yeah, I just thought, you know, we were technically sort of around days and see them all the time. I think we had 2 cars. We had like a mint green or turquoise like metallic Lanos in the drive. My mum used to drive that for a bit. And then my dad would either for a while we had this like British Racing green Nubera, and then there was also like a red Leganza on top of that as well. We had whenever there was a Matiz, it was usually that same almost British Racing green. Yeah, they were in their own way charming little cars they used, but obviously Chevrolet and whatever they've gone on to now. But yeah, that's that.
We definitely need some older guests on here, Rob, because I mean you're talking about sort of being born in 1990, and I was already driving by then.
Yeah.
To be fair, Paul, I'm going to make you feel really old. I was born in 1991, so
yeah. He's got a year on me. He's got a year on me.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think age and wisdom and experience are combined, Rob. But
absolutely,
we'll continue and let you 2 embryos crack on with the rest of Scott's career.
I've never been called that before.
Well, Scott, let's carry on with your career, shall we? So, when was the first opportunity for you to do some talking?
I kind of produced it myself in a way, really. So it essentially came towards the end of 2011 where I kind of discovered that maybe getting into commentating could be something. And where it came from, ironically, the first thing I ever commentated on was not properly officially, but I did it really just for fun. For those who remember, taking you back now, for those who remember the PS2 game, the official F1 game, Formula 1 2001, that had a TV mode where you could set your grid. I was that kid that literally set the grid and then just set the TV one away and then just started commentating on those races like to the TV just out loud because I felt like it. Just on a whim. I didn't think about it as a career or anything. I just sat there and talked. And then you got towards the end of 2011 and there was a competition that Autosport Show were putting on, and it was for someone to people to submit clips of them commentating, and whoever won it could then go do some stuff in the live action arena. So I thought, okay, and I looked at it. I didn't end up entering because I thought it was either too late, or I thought, well, I don't know how I can get clips or record myself doing anything. I didn't really have the tech at the time. But the guy that won it, he doesn't do anything in motorsport nowadays anymore, I don't think. He does more stuff for general kind of sports in Philadelphia, and quite well, actually, in his own way. It was a guy called Liam Jenkins, and he used to do lots of sim racing stuff, and he won it. And he still did sim racing for a little bit, and then he's now kind of moved into... He created something called Philly Sports Network, which I think he actually got sold. He actually then got bought by some kind of media company, and fair play to him. He built it up off his own back. He did, what I saw, a phenomenal job, so fair play to him. And he was commentating at the time, and this is a very different time when esports and sim racing was almost a little bit in its infancy, particularly not online stuff. And if you looked at the landscape back then, this was going into 2012, there's only really kind of 2 or 3 sort of big leagues that existed. There was Formula Sim Racing, which still exists, and Grand Prix Virtual World Championship, which still exists. But if you look at where it is now, the big ones, obviously, well, up until things went a bit pear-shaped this year, it was essentially F1 esports. That's the pinnacle now. But back then, it was all stuff on R Factor, pretty much. That was the main sim that you went on. And kind of online play was in a different place in that sense. In terms of, yes, there was F1 games, but if you wanted the proper, like, more sim experience, you went to R Factor, you went to the mods that they created. So I sort of thought, okay, well, how do I get into this? So I even reached out to Liam and I said, look, because he was doing some stuff for Formula Sim Racing at the time. And I said, how do I get into this? How do I possibly have a go at this? And he said, well, there's 2 leagues. There's FSR, as it was called, to abbreviate it, and GPVWC. And I saw FSR as like what F1 esports is today. I looked at it and thought, well, that's like the pinnacle. So, I mean, for me to aim for that immediately straight away when I'm done no commentary experience whatsoever, I'd be foolish to do that. So I said, okay, well, let's try GPVWC, because I didn't see it as having in a nice way, as it wasn't as high a profile as FSR. It's still getting up there now and does still well. You look at where it is now, it's quite different. So, and I think they were, by chance, looking on the website saying they were still looking for commentators. I think it was like a year-round thing. They were sort of advertising for anyone that wants to get involved. So I got in touch with the guy who runs it, a guy called Will Panisi, who I think he's still currently, last time I checked, I think he's still involved with the Alfa Romeo team in terms of their media side. He's done in F1, which now Stake, of course, and it will go through to Audi, depending on if he sticks around or does something else. But he was the guy who created essentially GPWC and ran it. So I got in touch with him and said, look, is there any way I could help out in some commentating? And he went, yeah, that's fine. You don't have to have any previous experience. You can come and do it. This commentary is still on YouTube to this day, and it was the first commentary I ever did of any kind, live commentary, and it was GPVWC, and it was their equivalent of like Formula 3 or like GP3. They were using a mod for Formula BMW cars. They called it Formula Challenge, and the first one I ever did was their opening rounds at Brands Hatch. This was about April 2012, and it was me and a couple of the guys in the box, and I just talked and did that. Did a couple more. I then got a chance to do a couple of the top level, which is like the Super League, which is their version of F1. That went quite well. And then I think Liam got in touch and asked if I'd be able to help him on one of the sub series, like the feeder series going up for FSR, which is the World Series. So he asked me to do that, and that was, I think, Sepang had a go on that. And then this is when it was all run through race department. I think it, in a way, I think it still is, but I don't know what the setup with FSR is at the moment. But it was mainly their main forums they used was race department. And I got an email from the guy who was looking after, I think, like the admin for the league or something else, and he said, for someone who has never I've never come across before. I said, I thought you in his words, your commentary was fantastic. I said, and he then said to me, would you be interested in doing some stuff for the World Championship? And that was for me, like thinking someone's hit the pin. That was for me now. If someone asked me now, do you want to do some stuff for F1 esports? And at the time, sort of like 21-year-old me was like, can't believe this. This is like literally the pinnacle of stuff I'm being asked to do it. And so I did do some stuff on and off throughout 2012, 2013 on sim racing stuff. But then as I was doing it and I was enjoying it, I was thinking to myself, maybe there's a way I can do this for real. I can do some stuff like in the real world.
And that concludes this episode of the Driving Talk podcast. Don't forget, we've got part 2 coming up with Scott Woodwiss. So you've just listened to part 1. Part 2 comes out in a couple of days' time, where Scott Woodwiss will be talking about his relationship with the late, great Brian Jones, a stalwart of commentary at Brands Hatch, what he wants to do in the future, and just what are some of his favourite commentary moments. Join us then, the Driving Talk podcast, powered by Icon.